we're talking about water, we're talking about all sorts of interesting things. Most people don't come after dinner to hear from the wastewater guy. So at least we're not having dinner and talking about wastewater. But we're actually going to talk about what we're doing to take it well beyond wastewater. In fact, the little blurb that was out on your website talked about us putting gray water in the ground. That is false. So we are putting drinking water, quality water in the ground. We'll talk more about how we got here. I think this is just a continuation of the weekend's events in Virginia Beach, something in the water. And we've got a lot of water around us and a lot of water-themed talks going on. And Swift, unfortunately, we didn't get Taylor Swift here to talk about this, but we did grab that name, and that is actually, in the use around water, we've got a trademark around that, so she can't take that one from us. So let me jump in, because I can talk all night about this. I know we're time limited, at least you all probably are. I can keep going, but we'll see where we go. So I wanted to step back quickly, because not everyone recognizes HRSD's background. You know, what are we doing and why are we doing it and how we got here. And so a little bit of history around HRSD. First, when I take this on the road, Hampton Roads is a hard description for people to understand where we are. So when I'm going across the country talking about this, I have to have that big star on the East Coast to show them where we're at. We actually serve a very large area. So all those green areas are part of our service area. We just recently added Surrey County up in this area. They became part of the Hampton Roads Sanitation District just 2 years ago. We're actually having some discussions right now with folks on the Eastern Shore. So it's not necessarily all connected, but it takes advantage of the professional abilities that we have to manage wastewater appropriately. So I'm going to give you a little history of how we got to where we're at. I like to show this one to our Chesapeake Bay Foundation friends, because we are really good friends. And there's a big head start on polluting the bay, and we just really got started cleaning it up. So I like to remind them it's going to take us a little while to get there. But these are some major points in our timeline as we made it. But really what's interesting is our history goes back to the 1920s. So if you go back in time, turn of the century, the Hampton Roads area was one of the major shellfish producers and oyster producers for the world. So big oyster production in Hampton and Newport News and other parts of the region. The Darling Oyster Company in Hampton was sending oysters across country by train on ice, across the ocean to Europe on ice. And people started getting sick eating them. I'm thinking, well, it's because they're shipping them that far on ice. But no, it was actually, they started looking into it, and they were getting sick because of the bacteria that was in the oysters that were being harvested in Hampton Roads. And so in 1925, the Virginia Department of Health made a very unpopular move and condemned the majority of those oyster beds and said they weren't fit for human consumption. And at the time, Hampton Roads was dumping 30 million gallons of raw sewage a day into our local waterways. Because we were handling wastewater the same way the Romans pretty much did. We just took it downhill away from the developed parts of the community and dumped it in the nearest body of water, untreated, just straight pipe right out there. And we were doing that even as late as into the 20s in this region. And so, you know, this is Virginia, the Old Dominion, so we know we got a problem. The oyster beds are closed. Bacteria is the problem. We know we're dumping sewage in there, but it's, you know, it's Old Dominion, we got to study it a little bit. So from 1925 until 1938, you know, blue ribbon panels and commissions and this and that were formed to try to figure out what to do about the wastewater that was polluting the waters in Hampton Roads. You know, and these waters, while they separate us, we all talk about the bridges and tunnels, about how they separate our community, they also connect us. Because the same water body that touches Portsmouth touches Norfolk, touches Hampton. And so trying to clean this problem up, you really couldn't do it on your own. If one of our communities had decided, hey, we're going to clean our wastewater act up, and no one else did, the waterways would still all be polluted. So in an unbelievably brilliant foresight move, our region decided it needed to do this regionally. And you know, I didn't know the history of this when I took this position, and we started doing a little research. But it turned out that we didn't get along as a region in the 1930s or 40s any more than we do today. And so it turned into a nasty battle. And so what you're seeing up there is a piece of a full-page ad that was in the Norfolk paper trying to get people to vote. We went to public referendum. After all those studies, 1938, they put on a public referendum to create the Hampton Roads Sanitation District to solve this pollution problem. Put it on the ballot in 1938, and it failed. Who wants clean water? You know, no, we didn't want clean water. We couldn't get along. It was, you know, we had industrial complex communities saying, hey, we don't want to do that. We don't want an appointed board setting rates. We don't want someone building this. It was all the same arguments for those who have flashbacks to 2006 and the transportation referendums over it sounded just like that in 1938 when this was on the ballot. So they retooled it a little bit and put it on the ballot again in 1940, and the real change was really that communities could decide to be in or out, which kind of defeats the purpose, but that was what they had to do to get the referendum back on the ballot in 1940. This ad, and I know you can't read the names up there, but these are movers and shakers, and we've got roads, you know, lots of names that you would recognize for buildings and roads. So those community leaders recognized that for Hampton roads to succeed, we needed to figure out how to clean up our water. So 1940, back on the ballot, they created the Hampton Road Sanitation District. So what we are is this really unusual animal. We're a political subdivision of Commonwealth. So we're essentially a county or a city from any aspect, except we don't have firm borders. Communities can decide they want to be in or out, and they can approach the circuit court in their community and ask to be in. And frankly, we could object, but the judge gets to make the decision. So it's a very interesting process, and we've grown over the years. And I think Portsmouth's the only one that's jumped out a couple different times, but they're in for good now. So I think we're good. So this is what we've got. We've got a governor-appointed board, so they aren't connected to the local government. So this is a little unusual. So they're appointed by the governor, and at one time it was probably a political move to be on the HRSD board, because where sewer went, development went, property values rise, right? So back in the 50s and 60s, as we're growing rapidly, when HRSD puts a big interceptor through an area, the property values in that area go up. So the people that were serving on our commission wanted to be there for a variety of reasons, but it was pretty political. We're pretty well built out from a major sewer system point of view, so the people that get put on there, help get their friend elected governor, and he puts them on a sewer board. Not exactly something they go around talking at cocktail parties proud about. They didn't get to go to the Port Authority and fly on international trade missions. They're learning about sewer. So we don't get political animals on our board anymore. We get citizens that actually just want to give back to the Commonwealth and serve. And they serve basically no salary. They actually get compensated like the Commonwealth Transportation Board, a whopping $50 a meeting. So they're volunteers for all intents and purposes. So here are the big water challenges facing Hampton Roads right now. So we're going to jump forward, and they aren't that different than what we're facing back in the 30s when we were created. But restoration of Chesapeake Bay, I think everyone, when we do polling, that's number one in Hampton Roads residents' concerns around water. It's like, let's get the bay cleaned up. And there's no doubt that's very important. Adaptation to sea level rise has suddenly become real. And as Brian mentioned, we could all argue over the cause, but I think most residents in Hampton Roads recognize that the sea is rising. And we'll talk a little about that. Depletion of groundwater resources, as Brian was talking a little bit, that doesn't make the radar for a lot of our folks, and I'll explain why. And then we've got some sewer overflow issues, and that just plays into this from a federal consent order. So what's that mean? That means every time any sewage comes out of our system other than through a permitted outfall. So every one of our treatment plants has a specific permit, and we're allowed to discharge from that point. But if in a big rainstorm it comes out of a manhole or a clean out, or heaven forbid in your basement, that's a violation of the Clean Water Act and subject to a penalty of $32,500 per day per occurrence. And we have the wonderful process of self-reporting those every time it happens. So that's great. So we're criminals right from the start, because there's no system that doesn't overflow on occasion. And they made it a national priority to try to eliminate those. And so the Department of Justice, the world's largest law firm, rolls into town about in 2005. Said, hey, we got a deal for you. You can pay us $11 million worth of fines from the last few years, or you can negotiate a deal to figure out how to fix your system a little more. And so we really didn't have much choice, and so we're dancing with that bear still, trying to figure out how we're going to do that. But that plays into how we're funding this work, so we'll come back to that, maybe. So this is currently what's happening. So about 80% of our water that comes to our homes is surface water source. So in Virginia Beach, think Lake Gaston, Suffolk's got a series of reservoirs, Portsmouth has reservoirs, Newport News, Waterworks has them all the way to the peninsula. So the majority of the folks that are our customers get their water from a surface water source. And we haven't had a major drought, as Brian was talking about, in about 15, 16, 20 years almost since we got a major drought. But they haven't. And so almost all of our water purveyors have permits to withdraw water from the ground as emergency supplies and supplemental supplies. We'll come back to that. But for the most part, the 20% of our customers that get their water directly from the groundwater are James City County, The entire county is fully dependent on groundwater. They don't have a series of reservoirs upstream of them. They don't get along with any James City County people. So they don't get along with their neighbors very well. Sort of that same discussion we were talking about, because Newport News has lots of water, but the two of them can't get along. I think Virginia Beach and Norfolk might have had that problem at some point, but we won't go there. So they get their water from the ground, and recently the Department of Environmental Quality said they had to reduce their permit quantity and they have to come up with another source by the end of this next permit. So sometime in the 2028 timeframe, they've got to have a new source of water, or they're going to not have enough to serve their population. We're essentially a water-rich area. We get a lot of rainfall. We get good surface water for most of the time, and so we treat you use the water in your homes and businesses. It flows to our treatment plants. We treat to exacting standards. So we've got permits that tell us exactly what we can put in that water. Think of this business model. We've got no control over what comes to us as far as what's in it, really. I mean, and I'll talk, we have a little bit of control, not much. And really little control over when you send it to us. But we've got to treat it to meet exacting standards 24/7, 365 days, and discharge it. And we can't just turn it off to fix it. So it's got to be running all the time. So it's a pretty tough business model, and we do it pretty well. But those standards are set on the water quality that we're dumping our water back into. We return it back into nature. We put it back really in 4 locations: the Atlantic Ocean, we put it back in the James River, the Elizabeth River, and York River. A little bit of the Rat we won't talk about. So those locations, none of those are drinking water sources. So we don't treat the water to meet drinking water standards. We treat it to match the aquatic needs and recreational contact in those water bodies. Nobody goes out in any of those places, takes a cup, dips it in, and drinks it, luckily. But our water is very clean. In fact, it's cleaner than those water bodies when it goes in, and we're highly regulated to make that happen. We do it really well. We've done it really well for the last 80 years. Award-winning plants. We got that down. So we could continue on this path for long.